This is a CNN special report. America's New War. Tonight, the first bird's eye view of the devastation. Wall Street vows to get back to business. The nation honors the victims.
So when you get back to your mom and dad this morning, I want you to give them a big old hug and hold on to them and tell them you love them. And I bet they're going to do the same thing for you.
And President Bush takes aim.
Our nation was horrified, but it's not going to be terrorized. We're a nation that can't be cowed by evildoers.
The Vice President reveals what the U.S. was ready to do to stop a fourth hijack attack.
You've got an airplane full of American citizens, civilians, captured by hostages, captured by terrorists, headed, and are you going to, in fact, shoot it down, obviously, and kill all those Americans on board?
Also tonight, victims of Tuesday's inferno.
And it's this big ball of fire just engulfed me. I just froze. I didn't do anything. I just stood there.
How New York has captured newfound admiration from many Americans. And in depth on the suspected terrorist mastermind, Osama bin Laden. This is a CNN special report, America's New War. From New York, here's Aaron Brown.
Good evening again. In less than 12 hours, they will ring the opening bell on Wall Street, about a block and a half from where the World Trade Center once stood. It's supposed to happen as it does most every weekday at 9:30 Eastern Time. A lot of people will be holding their breath. It's not going to be any other morning. That sound of the bell will, to all who hear it, serve notice that this city, New York, and this country is moving forward after the unfathomable horror of Tuesday morning. And we saw that horror more clearly today, personally, than we have at any point in our coverage from the inside of a Coast Guard helicopter flying overhead. And we'll be showing you some of those pictures coming up. New Yorkers have been working relentlessly to try and get the lower part of the city ready for business tomorrow. Workers continue the grim task of rescue and recovery, removing the debris and the rubble from ground zero. They still call it a rescue operation, though no one has been rescued since Wednesday, and the toll tonight of the missing stands at nearly 5,000. It is, of course, Sunday, and while the rescue workers did not take a break, millions of other New Yorkers and Americans filled churches trying to make some sense of the senselessness of it all. As the nation reflected on the crisis, the president once again lashed out at the terrorists who brought us to this moment. And the vice president, for the first time since the crisis began, broke his silence, warning Afghanistan that it faces, quote, the full wrath of the United States of America if it does not turn over the alleged terrorist here, Osama bin Laden. The biggest investigation in American history is underway and expanding tonight. Sources say 2 new arrest warrants were issued for what are still being called material witnesses. We have, as many of you know, been covering this since the early hours of Tuesday morning, since about 9:30 Tuesday, when we first looked out behind us on this balcony at what was the World Trade Center. We have seen, as millions of you have, the destruction and the rubble. We saw it differently today. Early this morning, we boarded a Coast Guard helicopter just off the southern tip of Manhattan Island. It was on a cutter there. We came out there from Staten Island. It flew overhead. Rather than come back hours later and polish our thoughts and our words, we thought we would show you the pictures as we shot them and just replay the words we spoke minutes after touching down. When you get in the air, it unfolds in front of you. We thought, to be perfectly honest, we would be shocked by what we saw, and we can only assume that we've seen so much since Tuesday, we are temporarily shocked out. In fact, as we came around the southern tip of the island and started to move in closer, it was almost a sense of awe. Awe at the audaciousness of the plan, awe at the evil brilliance of the plan, awe at the power that those 2 jet bombs, fully loaded wide-body jets, they're powered to destroy. It turns out, as sometimes is the case, the cliches in many cases are true. As you come around the island, we're moving now to the west, around the southern tip of Manhattan Island. The Trade Center towers would have been just in front as we zoom past that building. Just in front of there, tower number 1 would have been right there, right where you're looking in between those 2 buildings. Now we're farther to the west looking back. You see the smoke. To us at least, it is a much wider area of damage than we thought it was from our location from where we've been broadcasting. There's a huge hole in the middle. And I'll venture a guess here, and it's only that as one of the 2 towers came tumbling down, it crashed on top of what I believe was building number 5 of the World Trade Center complex. As we say, the cliches turn out in many ways to be true. It does look like Mount St. Helens in an urban setting erupted. Oddly enough, it could have been a kind of modern Germany at the end of World War II, after the Allies moved in, bombing Germany. But it is in this relatively tight 8 or 10 block area. It's not vast across the city. It's just focused on this small area. It is also somewhat sickening when you look down and you see the dirt and the steel and the concrete, the water pouring on it all, and you realize as we stand here on this beautiful September Sunday morning in New York, there are 5,000 people still buried. There probably are a lot of adjectives I could throw out at you now. I looked down on that. It was sickening. It was sad. It was horrifying. The pictures pretty much tell that story, though, don't they? Last night at this time, we tried to give you a sense of the New York skyline before and after. Those were they weren't ground level shots, but they certainly were shots that didn't allow us to get over the area. So we want to try again here to show you what was and what is we can roll the tape, and I'll just chat over it as we go. Statue of Liberty just off the harbor. As you wing your way towards the World Trade Center, you see the towers in the upper left. That's what was. Down on the right, that's what is. The beautiful Manhattan skyline, as it might have looked at 8:45 on Tuesday morning, and as it absolutely looked today down in the lower right. It's something to see. It takes your breath away. It does. One quick note on this as well. I just want to take a moment to thank the Coast Guard for their efforts in helping us take a look at that today. The Coast Guard was among the first on the scene when the planes hit. They were very much involved. Their cutters were very much involved in helping the evacuation of people from lower Manhattan. They are now responsible, as they always are in New York, of keeping security in the Port of New York. It's obviously quite different now. And this was an especially difficult day for that Coast Guard unit on Staten Island that was working with us. They learned that another of their group is missing. That's the command center that controls the port. It's not unlike an air traffic control center. Anyway, the admiral we talked to today, who's also the chief of port of New York Harbor, had just left advising his men and women that another of their comrades was missing in the rubble. Our thanks to them. Now on to the investigation, which is the largest investigation in American history. 2 new warrants have been issued. Again, they are talking about these people not as suspects necessarily, but as material witnesses. That is just one part of the story that is unfolding. CNN national correspondent Eileen O'Connor is part of the team at CNN that is working on the investigative side, and Eileen joins us tonight from Washington. Good evening again.
Good evening, Aaron. Well, FBI agents, Aaron, are telling me they're just exhausted, but they are moving forward with one of the biggest manhunts, as you said, ever conducted here. What is thwarting their investigation are names that are related, similar, or aliases, stolen names. 2 new sealed arrest warrants have been issued for 2 people. They're wanted as material witnesses, sources say. Now, in addition, 2 other men already in custody under material witness warrants are not cooperating, according to investigators. But 2 others being held on INS violations, visa violations, are. Why? Well, they were found, sources say, with incriminating evidence. On Wednesday, authorities stopped an Amtrak train from St. Louis to San Antonio and took into custody 2 men, Mohammed Jawed Asmath and Ayub Ali Khan, on INS violations. Sources say the 2 had been booked on a flight from Newark to San Antonio on Tuesday. It had been diverted to St. Louis. Law enforcement sources say the men also possessed a chilling item: box cutters. Barbara Olson, wife of the Solicitor General, told her husband on a cell phone call from American Airlines Flight 77 that crashed into the Pentagon that the men who hijacked her plane used box cutters.
She told me that she had been herded to the back of the plane. She mentioned that they had used knives and box cutters to hijack the plane. She mentioned that the pilot had announced that the plane had been hijacked. I believe she said that. I had to tell her about the 2 airplanes that had hit the World Trade Center.
Law enforcement sources are looking into the possibility that Asmath and Al Khan were headed for this house in San Antonio, owned by a man with a similar last name to 2 of the hijackers. He's now in custody on potential INS violations. They are also looking into this residence in Jersey City, New Jersey. Both Al Khan and Asmath lived here. The FBI searched the home, and sources say are finding the information helpful. They are also looking into the possibilities that other people connected to the hijackers used this address at one time or another. The home in Jersey City is close to the mosque where Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman used to preach before he went to prison for his role in inspiring the first attack against the World Trade Center in 1993. The official watch list includes more than 100 people. The FBI is so determined, they have actually distributed the list, Aaron, to rental car places, hotels, and of course airlines. They're reaching out to people in the public to try to apprehend these people. Now, there's more than 24 people are already being held under possible visa violations, the Justice Department says. Sources say many will not have any information, but others may be helpful or even guilty. Even the Attorney General acknowledges investigators are certainly working under the assumption that more attacks were planned, and there are still terrorists in this country willing and wanting to conduct more attacks. Aaron?
Eileen, a couple of things. You and your team have been dealing with these sources on all manner of stories over the years. When you deal with them now, do you get the sense from them that this is different than anything else they've ever done?
Yes, it is. I mean, one of them I talked to today said to me, I'm just having to relearn this all over again. And that's what's so intriguing. A lot of things that they thought they'd solved are just coming back. And so things that they had laid to rest as potentially, you know, that they had finished it off, they're finding they're having to reopen it. And that's, of course, then also causing a lot of second guessing, a lot of guilty feelings, I think, on a lot of investigators' part. Also, the breadth of this is really amazing to everybody. And, Aaron, it's really confusing. These guys are using all very similar names.
I feel better knowing I'm not the only one who's confused in all of this as I go through the list of names. If they are, that works for me. One other thing, is this pretty much old-fashioned police work? Do you get any sense that they've turned a lot of informants other than the people who are cooperating? Can you give us any kind of detail on the methods that are being used?
It's good old-fashioned gumshoe police work. In Florida, you saw it today. In a fairly affluent neighborhood, neighbors were shocked to see that the FBI coming back for the second time in a week. Now, why? Retracing the steps of some hijackers. This time, they were bringing in forensic teams to scour an apartment there. As it turns out, and we knew this through checking computer documents, 3 of the hijackers lived in this apartment, according to those computer records. Law enforcement sources found that out, checking the same sources. The FBI is searching these places. They're gathering evidence like credit card receipts, bank records, travel documents.